Have you ever wondered if a single number could hold the secret rhythm of your soul? Not your lucky number, not some mystical code on your license plate, but the final digit, just that one, at the end of the year you were born. Most people never give it a second glance. It feels trivial, random, just a leftover scrap of the calendar. But the psyche is not so careless. As Carl Jung reminds us, numbers are pre-existent and eternal. They are archetypes of order. They don't just measure time, they reveal it. They speak to the hidden geometry that shapes our choices, our fears, our silent longing for wholeness. So what if that final digit, 0 to 9, is more than coincidence? What if it's a symbolic fingerprint, a subtle imprint your soul chose as it stepped into the world? Each number hums with its own mythic resonance. This is not fortune-telling. It is soul-telling, a chance to glimpse the hidden patterns that move you, the archetypal energies that your unconscious knows, but your mind keeps forgetting. If you find this perspective valuable, please subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. It helps Wealth Psy reach more souls ready to awaken. Most of us are trained to treat numbers like dead things. Cold, rigid, sterile. We memorize them in school, calculate them in banks, inscribe them on birth certificates and gravestones. But we forget that numbers in the ancient mind and in the deep mind are alive. Carl Jung once wrote that numbers are among the most primitive and universal symbols of the unconscious. They belong to what he called the archetypal realm, those timeless patterns that shape the very structure of our psyche. Long before we built clocks to slice up time or spreadsheets to balance ledgers, we told stories through numbers. 3 was the sacred triad, 7 the seeker's path, 12 the cosmic cycle. And yet, in our modern age, we have stripped them of mystery. The final digit of your birth year. It's just trivia, right? One click on an ID card, one keystroke on a form. But what if that tiny figure still hums with the same archetypal resonance that shaped ancient myths? What if it is a living cipher for the atmosphere you were born into, a psychic timestamp, not just a calendar fact? This is not superstition. It is not about fortune-telling or rigid fate. It is about seeing through the mundane, peering into the hidden matrix beneath your everyday life. When you know what a symbol wants to say, you gain a precious chance to live more consciously. You can ask, where does this pattern pull me? What archetypal energy am I unconsciously projecting onto my relationships, my ambitions, my wounds? And that is the deeper danger. When you ignore a living symbol, it does not disappear. It slips into the shadow. It becomes a blind spot that acts out in your life over and over until you finally turn around and look. So that single digit at the end of your birth year, seemingly irrelevant, becomes a portal. It invites you to remember that nothing is random in the psyche. Even the simplest symbol can hold the code to your hidden fears, your secret gifts, your unspoken longings. It's a mirror, not a prison, but a clue. A reminder that your soul did not arrive blank, but patterned, woven into a greater collective story where numbers, myths, and archetypes swirl like constellations guiding you home. To reject that is to remain asleep. To see it is to awaken and begin the long, beautiful work of reclaiming the symbols that have always been yours. So let's stand before this ancient mirror, one number at a time. Feel into each archetype. See where it stirs something you've always known, but never fully named. 0, the womb of infinity. 0 is not emptiness. It is the fertile void. In ancient symbolism, the circle has always meant wholeness, the Ouroboros that devours its own tail, to begin again. If your birth year ends in 0, you carry the subtle imprint of infinite potential and the paradox of stillness and motion. You may feel like your life never quite settles into one shape. You are the open door, the quiet presence. Sometimes others may project emptiness onto you, misunderstanding your calm as passivity. But within you is the primal ground from which all things emerge. Your soul calls you to rest in the center, to remember that true power often hides in plain nothingness. 1. The pioneer's fire. 1 is the spark that ignites. In mythology, it is the hero's first step, the divine breath that says, "Let there be light." If you were born under 1, you bear the archetype of the initiator, the one who dares. Your path is about courage, individuality, and the sometimes lonely road of carving a new trail. People with this imprint often feel a deep tension, the longing for connection versus the soul's demand to stand apart. Leadership comes naturally, but so does the risk of burning out or burning others. The task is not to tame the flame, but to steward it wisely so your pioneering spirit uplifts instead of scorches. 2. The lover's mirror. 2 is the archetype of duality, the sacred dance of you and the other. It is connection, empathy, reflection. Those born under 2 often find themselves pulled into roles of peacemaker, bridge builder, or silent absorber of others' pain. You see yourself most clearly in the eyes of another, but this gift can also be your burden. Boundaries blur. Self dissolves. The soul lesson here is to hold space for intimacy and individuality. Love fiercely, but do not lose your center. 3. The divine child song. 3 is expression, creativity, play. It is the archetype of the child and the messenger, the one who finds delight in giving voice to what others feel but cannot say. If 3 marks your birth, you may feel drawn to storytelling, art, music, any form that lets the soul speak freely. But beware the shadow, the mask of the performer. When your words serve only to charm, they hollow out your truth. Your calling is to let your voice stay connected to the raw pulse of your being, to speak not just to please, but to reveal. 4. The builder's foundation. 4 is the archetype of structure. It is the square, the 4 walls that keep us safe, the stable table upon which life can rest. Those born under 4 often carry an instinct for order, responsibility, and enduring frameworks. You may feel a deep duty to family community, or a legacy that outlives you. But structure can become a prison if it hardens. The soul's work is to remember walls can protect or confine. What do you build, and does it still serve your growth? 5. The rebel's dance. 5 is change incarnate. It is the archetype of evolution motion, the wild card that refuses to settle. A soul marked by 5 is never content for long. You feel most alive in moments of risk, adventure, and reinvention. At your best, you inspire others to break free from stale patterns, to remember that life is fluid. At your worst, you can become addicted to escape, leaving chaos in your wake. The challenge is to ride the wave of change without drowning in your own restlessness. 6. The caregiver's hearth. 6 cradles the archetype of nurture and protection. It is the mother, the father, the friend who holds you when the world feels cruel. Born under 6, you likely carry an instinct to care, to tend to comfort, to heal. But the gift of caretaking can become martyrdom. Your soul must learn to give without losing yourself, to nourish others without neglecting your own roots. Boundaries are your sacred lesson. 7. The seeker's lantern. 7 has long been the number of the spiritual quest. It is the hermit's lamp, the philosopher's question, the pilgrim's path inward. If your final digit is 7, you may feel you never quite belong on the surface of life. You are drawn to what hides beneath the secrets, the symbols, the whispers and dreams. Solitude feeds you, but isolation can wound you. The work is to share your insight so that your inner light does not stay locked away in the tower of your mind. 8. The Alchemist's Forge. 8 is power and transformation. In many traditions, it is the double spiral, the infinity loop that turns suffering into gold. Souls born under 8 are often tested early, confronted with challenge or loss that demands resilience. Your archetypal task is mastery, not domination, but the alchemical art of turning wounds into wisdom, pain into purpose. Shadow 8 clings to control, fearing vulnerability. But true strength is the courage to be shaped by life's fire without losing your soul. 9. The Sage's Threshold. 9 completes the cycle. It is the final turning before the spiral begins anew, the number of completion, release, and spiritual maturity. Those with 9 at the end of their birth year often feel an old soul's weight. You may be drawn to helping others let go of grudges, attachments, illusions. You carry the medicine of endings. But endings can be lonely. The soul lesson here is to see that every farewell is also a birth, and that wisdom is not about detachment from life, but a deeper embrace of its impermanence. When you hold these numbers lightly, as living symbols, not rigid labels, they become inner guides. They whisper, "This is one note in your soul's song. Listen closely. Feel where it resonates." They do not trap you. They invite you. Each digit offers a glimpse of your hidden longings, your secret strengths, your blind spots waiting to be loved back into wholeness. This is how the psyche works. Through images, numbers, myths, it leaves breadcrumbs for you to follow home. Symbols do not vanish when ignored. They sink into the shadow, that psychic basement where everything you reject, deny, or repress lives on. Jung saw this again and again. The brighter the symbol's light, the darker its shadow, if left unconscious. So it is with your birth year's final digit. Each number holds a gift, but also a hidden cost when you turn your back on it. 0's shadow. Dissolution. 0 whispers of wholeness and infinite potential. But when you reject its quiet, you can drown in emptiness, drifting through life, unanchored, disconnected, undefined. The fertile void becomes a void that devours. People may sense your stillness, but never see your essence. Your soul lesson is to find form within the formless, to give shape to the infinite. 1's shadow. Tyranny of ego. 1 burns with the pioneer's flame, but when unconscious, that fire becomes arrogance. You cling to independence so fiercely you scorch bridges you need. The heroic I mutates into isolation, and leadership curdles into domination. Your task is to temper courage with humility, to remember that true strength lifts others, not just the self. 2's shadow codependence. 2 longs for union, but when unconscious, this longing erases the self. You merge so completely, you forget your own boundaries. Others' pain becomes yours to fix endlessly. Your shadow feeds on approval, terrified of standing alone. The work is to claim your own face in the lover's mirror, to love without losing. 3's shadow, the hollow performer. 3 sings with the child's joy, but when exiled, that play becomes mask. You talk to entertain, create to impress, but the soul's truth goes silent. Restlessness sets in endless ideas no root. You may hide your pain behind a smile, terrified that silence will expose your emptiness. The medicine is to risk real expression words that come from the gut, not the stage. 4's shadow, rigidity and control. 4 builds lasting structures, but when unconscious, those walls trap you. Order becomes obsession. Stability becomes stagnation. You fear chaos so deeply that you suffocate growth. Relationships feel like duty. Dreams feel boxed in. The invitation is to remember, strong foundations must flex, or they will crack. 5's shadow, escapism and chaos. 5 embodies change, but in shadow, change becomes addiction. You flee boredom so violently, you never finish what you start. Commitment feels like a cage. Roots feel like chains. You drift from thrill to thrill, confusing motion with growth. Your soul calls you to find freedom within form, to let transformation deepen, not scatter. 6's shadow, martyrdom. 6 nurtures and protects, but when unconscious care becomes sacrifice, you pour yourself out for others, neglecting your own well. You resent those you help, yet you cannot stop. The mother or father within you becomes controlling, smothering. The lesson is fierce to care for yourself first, so your giving does not breed hidden bitterness. 7's shadow, isolation and cynicism. 7 seeks truth, but when shadowed, the quest turns cold. You retreat so deeply into your inner world, you forget how to belong to life. Your wisdom becomes judgment. Your solitude becomes a fortress. You watch others from afar, secretly longing to connect, yet scorning the superficial. Your task is to share your lantern's light, to trust that your insight can nourish, not just protect. 8's shadow, corruption of power. 8 transforms pain into mastery, but its shadow clings to control. Power twists into manipulation. Success becomes an armor against vulnerability. You fear loss so much that you hold everything too tight. Money status people. The forge of your soul becomes a prison. The calling is to surrender, to let life shape you, not just the other way around. 9's shadow, wounded healer syndrome. 9 closes the cycle, but when unconscious, the sage becomes the martyr. You carry everyone's burdens, but your own. You mistake endings for abandonment. You become stuck in old wounds, mistaking suffering for depth. Your soul's lesson is to release not just for others, but for yourself, to let go with love, so new life can begin. In the end, every number has 2 faces. One shines in the light of your conscious awareness. The other lurks in the dark, waiting to be seen. Jung wrote that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is your task, to see the symbol in the mirror and its shadow too. Only then does the number become what it was always meant to be, a living key to wholeness. So what do you do with this number now? This final digit that once looked like a stray mark on your birth certificate, now revealed as a tiny yet potent mirror of your soul's pattern. You don't worship it. You don't cling to it like a horoscope prediction you check every morning. You walk with it lightly, consciously, as you would carry a dream image, a recurring animal in your visions, or an ancient myth that keeps returning to you. This is the art of individuation. Jung called it the process by which a person becomes whole, not perfect, not untouchable, but complete in the sense that all your fragments are finally invited home. You reclaim what you've exiled: your gifts, your wounds, your shadows, even your symbols. Numbers are one thread in this tapestry. When you look at your birth year's final digit through this lens, you begin a dialogue. Where does this energy live in me? When have I denied it, overused it, projected it onto others? A soul marked by 5, for example, learns to ride, change with grace instead of running from rootedness. A soul carrying the 4 must ask, Am I building walls or foundations? The two must learn to stand alone in the mirror, even while loving the other. Zero's task is to breathe form into the formless, to let the void birth shape. These are not easy tasks. They are not overnight projects or personality tweaks. They are lifelong invitations, symbolic footprints that draw you deeper into the great spiral of self-awareness. And the deeper you go, the more you see how this tiny symbol connects to bigger ones. Your final digit is not separate from the decade you were born into the collective dreams and wounds of that era. It is not separate from your family's psychic inheritance, the ancestral patterns you may carry without knowing. It is not separate from your personal wounds, the complexes in Jung's words, that keep you repeating the same story until you claim it as your own. Everything is linked. This is why Jung saw the world not as random fragments, but as a living mandala, a symbol of wholeness that holds the chaos together. Your birth digit is like one tile in that mandala, seemingly small, yet its pattern radiates out in ways you can only begin to sense. And so the path forward is not about worshiping a number. It's about integrating its message. For some, this means working with it actively, journaling about what the archetype stirs in you, tracing how it shows up in your relationships, your fears, your dreams. For others, it means simply holding it in your awareness, a subtle compass that reminds you when you've drifted too far from your own center. Most importantly, you learn to see the shadow side too, because the energy you repress will not sit quietly. A 4 who denies their need for structure may find themselves attracting partners who are rigid and controlling a projection that becomes a battleground until it is owned. A 7 who rejects their seeker's solitude may fall into shallow chatter and never feed their true hunger for depth. A 9 who clings to endings without release may live in perpetual grief, never crossing the threshold into new life. But when you do the work, when you turn the symbol from fate into consciousness, you reclaim psychic energy that was once locked away. This is the real treasure of Jung's work. What you integrate does not haunt you anymore. It empowers you. It becomes part of the chorus of your soul, not some ghost singing alone in the basement. Look around your life. Where does your number's archetype already pulse? In the careers you choose, the lovers you attract, the conflicts that return like old songs. What happens if you greet it instead of fearing it? What if you ask, how can I live this energy consciously so it serves my growth instead of sabotaging it? This is the gentle, fierce path of individuation. Not to become perfect, but to become real. Not to erase your contradictions, but to weave them into something whole. So, the final digit of your birth year stops being just a fact on your ID and becomes what it always was. A small cipher for the sacred dance you came here to learn. When you hold your number close, yet never too tight, it becomes a companion. It reminds you that your life is not a linear march, but a spiral, always circling back, yet never exactly the same. Each turn brings you closer to the self Jung spoke of, the totality of all you are waiting to be remembered. Imagine for a moment that your life is a single circle drawn in the dark. A mandala that slowly reveals itself with every choice you make, every heartbreak you survive, every truth you dare to name. Somewhere along the edge of that circle sits a tiny, almost invisible mark, the final digit of your birth year. A single number, a single whisper. Yet within it hums the echo of countless souls who came before you, ancestors who danced to the same archetypal rhythms whether they knew it or not. Carl Jung, spent his life reminding us that we do not live as isolated fragments. We belong to a pattern older than any nation, older than any religion, older than any name scratched into the stone of a grave. We belong to the archetypes that shape the way a mother holds her child, the way a lover aches for union, the way a seeker sits awake at night, trying to name the thing that calls from the darkness. Numbers in this living myth are not just tools for accountants or scientists. They are breathing symbols, like dreams, like myths, like the shadow you see at dusk when you think you're alone. When you see them as dead, they remain dead. But when you remember them as alive, they begin to speak. So, this final digit, 0 or 3 or 7 or 9, is not your fate, not your prison. It is a secret invitation. Remember why you came here. Remember what your soul longs to build, to burn away, to seek, to hold, to release. One day, your circle will close. Your birth date will be carved into a stone, just like those who came before. But in between those numbers, you get to choose how consciously you dance with the symbols you've inherited. You get to choose whether you repeat the same pattern blindly or step through it into something freer, truer, more whole. Look around you. Every person you meet carries their own hidden digit, their own myth in miniature. What would life feel like if we honored that? If, instead of dismissing each other as random, we saw the living symbols flickering behind each face, each fear, each longing. This is the ancient promise that when you become conscious of your patterns, when you see the secret shape in the number, the shadow, the light, you do not just change yourself. You help heal the greater circle that holds us all. You add one small stroke of gold to the great broken vessel of humanity, mending it from within. And so under every mundane date, every birth year, every passport number, every forgotten code, there is always a hidden flame. Your task is simple and endless. Tend that flame. Listen for its secret, and walk your life as if it were a living mandala, one you are always finishing yet never done. If this symbolic glimpse into your birth year's final digit stirred something in you, a memory, a question, an old dream you buried long ago, honor it. Hold it close like a small ember. Ask yourself, how does this archetype move through my days? Where does its light guide me? Where does its shadow still bind me? If you feel called, share your reflections in the comments below. Let your story remind someone else that they are not alone in this great hidden dance. And if this journey spoke to your soul, remember to like this video and subscribe to Wealth Pizai. So together, we keep tending the symbolic fire that brings us home to ourselves.